Joining me on the line, he is from We Are Iowa Local 5. He's the big morning weather guy now. Ladies and gentlemen, Brandon Lawrence on the line. Hey, how you liking mornings so far?
Hey, thanks for having me. I love it, I think. No, I'm kidding. It's good. It is an adjustment. I get up every day at 1:30 in the morning, and I drink a ton of coffee, and at 2:30, and I still drink some more coffee. But I'm getting the hang of it. It's a new challenge that I like a lot.
You know, when I was doing mornings, I ended up starting to sleep in 4-hour shifts. As weird as that sounds, like I would, because I was my wife would be, she was my girlfriend at the time, but she would be at work all day. So I'd get home at like 12 or 1 or, whatever the day had.
Yeah.
So I'd go back to sleep for like 4 hours, get up, hang out with her until it was bedtime. And then I'd go to sleep from like 12 to 4. And that was...
Hey, that's not a bad idea. I have new respect for when people say they take those 20-minute power naps, and I used to think, there's no way that would ever work. Oh, it works. I go home, sleep on the couch for 20 minutes and feel like a new man afterwards.
It is amazing when you can get sleep where you can, how good 20 minutes can do you. So,
right.
Anyways, well, congratulations on the morning spot, man. That's awesome for you. We're glad for you. It's... Well, it's a year anniversary of a date no one really wants to remember, isn't it?
I know. Yeah, today marks a year since the Derecho basically plowed across Iowa and caused damage and destruction from, Des Moines all the way over to Cedar Rapids. And it was a really bad day. And no, it's not one anybody wants to remember. But at the same time, I think it's one nobody's going to forget anytime soon either.
No. Since we've lived in our house in Ankeny, the two most powerful storms for different reasons have happened since we've lived in this house, and we've been affected by both of them. So, yes, I remember the Derecho well. Let me ask you this. Let's start here. As that day started, and I can't remember, were you doing afternoons or nights at the time?
So at the time I was on the night shift.
Okay.
But actually happened to be here at the time. I was working a day shift that day.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, I was up early that morning, and then it got really chaotic, which I think you're going to ask me, about that.
Well, my question is, when you guys first started getting kind of taking notice of this storm, at what point did you go, this is going to be a big deal?
All right. Well, I'll put it this way. When I woke up that morning, I did not think it was going to be that bad.
Okay.
I knew we would have a few storms. I didn't think it would be that severe. About 2.5 hours later is when I said, oh, good Lord, this is going to be something that we haven't experienced in a long time. And so, by that point, it's a Monday. Most people are already at work, or they're, doing what they need to do for the day. And to try to get the message out at that point that, hey, remember when we told you there were going to be a few storms, it wouldn't be that big deal. That's changed now. It's really hard. It's hard because a lot of people were not plugged in at that time to get that info.
Well, see, I was still working at home at the time, because of COVID. So my wife, I get up, and I woke up a little bit later for some reason that day, but she goes, hey, we need to get all the stuff, put away outside the house. There's a big storm coming. And I go, okay. Yeah. So we go out and we start doing this. And she said something about the neighbor's pool. They had one of those big inflatable pools, Mm-hmm. And she was like, do you think we had to grab it and throw it in the garage? I'm like, oh, okay. So I went and I grabbed this thing, and no sooner did I get it in the garage, and I looked up. And I've lived in Iowa all my life, so I've seen some pretty severe weather roll through.
Right.
I looked at my wife and I said, get in the house. Yeah. This is about to get bad. And it did, and it looked like a bomb went off in our neighborhood. I'll never forget that.
I hate using the word unprecedented because I've used it nonstop for the last year. But it really was. We have had derechos before in Iowa. They have happened. I don't think people always remember them because so many people said, oh, I've never heard of that word.
Yeah.
Well, believe it or not, in 2014, there was one in at least part of the state. And then I actually went back and did some research. Within the last 30, 40 years, there have been more than 10 derechos. But the difference, they have not gotten nearly that strong. And, we're probably a little bit more anticipated. Derecho is just a fancy word for saying a really long-lived wind storm. And the main criteria, the main thing that has to happen for derecho is this storm, this single line of storms, has to go over 250 miles. So this thing started on the Iowa-South Dakota border and actually didn't fully die off until somewhere in Indiana. So, I mean, it did go, from morning till night. Literally, it didn't stop.
So what did you guys do? I mean, for me that day, it turned into we have no power, we have no internet. I couldn't do my show that day. We had a tree slow fall onto the back of our house. It was a mess. So we dealt with that. On your guys' end, what were you dealing with down there?
Well, so I mean, I was at the station and I was with our other meteorologist, and we kind of looked at each other and we said, this is about to get really bad. So we start, alerting our other staff. Hey, whatever plans you've got for today, you might need to put them on pause because you're about to be covering a storm for the rest of the day. And we made the decision to go on the air pretty quickly with storms. We do that, obviously. People get so mad at us when we interrupt TV. But we're going to do it. The thing is we're going to do it anyway. We don't do it out of an ego thing. I promise I don't want to interrupt TV any more than people want me to. But if there's a bad enough storm, then we're going to do it. And so we decided to go on the air. And I think we were on the air for over 2.5 hours as it rolled through. And it wasn't until we got off the air where I looked at our other meteorologist and we just looked at each other for 10 seconds and we said, what just happened? And we've been in the studio in the building the entire time. So even though we've gotten live feeds and pictures and video of what's going on, we didn't even really know the extent of what it was. We've been inside a four-walled room with no windows.
Well, I was in our neighborhood as we have 40 or 50-year-old maple trees everywhere that were all over the place. So Brandon Lawrence from We're Iowa Local 5 joining me to talk about the year anniversary of the Derecho. So looking back on it, what's the one thing you really remember about that day?
I think the one thing I remember, and it may not be about that day specifically, but more about that week, is that I lost a ton of sleep. And I know that that's going to sound poor me, because so many people had other things to deal with. But what I mean is that I didn't sleep because I kept wondering to myself, did I say enough on air? Did I give people the best information? Why didn't we forecast this the right way? What did we miss?
Yeah.
And I kick myself for it still to this day. And people love to tell me, oh, well, nobody forecasted it and nobody could have predicted it. And I guess that's true, but, it doesn't necessarily make me feel better, because at the end of the day, I want to be able to predict stuff like that. But then at the same time, if I went out and told everybody that we would have 100-mile-per-hour winds, would anybody believe me? Or would they think I was going, a little kooky? Would they have said, no, that doesn't make a lot of sense? So that's what I remember, is that for a long time, it took me a while to come to terms with what had happened and realize that no matter what I forecast, no matter what I say, I can't stop the storm. I can give people information all day long, but there's no way to stop it from coming through. So would it have made that big of a difference?
This isn't when I ask this isn't like a shot at that, but a storm like this, how did it come out of nowhere?
So basically the way that I describe it is, and you're totally right, it did come out of nowhere in a sense. Overnight, the night before, there were some storms over in South Dakota.
Okay.
Typical summer night storms. We had a really, really juiced up environment in Iowa for severe weather. That's a lot of warm weather, a lot of humidity. We had we call it instability. It was ripe for storms in Iowa.
Sounds familiar.
Right, exactly. It's like what we've got right now, except that we look at all these different forecast models and which is basically a huge math equations that try to pinpoint what's going to happen in the future. And everything had these storms dying off over South Dakota. Okay. Everything made it look like they were just going to fall apart, which tends to happen with storms in the middle of the night because they lose energy and they collapse on themselves. And then that would be it. That maybe we would have some that redeveloped later in the day in Iowa. And we knew that might happen. But instead, these little storms, as weak and raggedy as they were, crossed over the border. It was like they hit some kind of battery pack, and they just all of a sudden had energy, and it just started exploding, and that was it. So, yes, there were storms. We didn't think that those storms would grow and become strong the way they did.
I got you. Brandon Lawrence joining me on the line, talking about the year anniversary of the Derecho. Do we have a Derecho in our future?
Well, I will tell you that this is not the answer anybody wants to hear. I will say pump the brakes, though, at the same time. It's not going to happen anytime soon, I don't think.
Okay.
But with the way that, weather events are becoming more extreme, we've seen that here in Iowa the last 10 years or so, we would be very naive to think that couldn't happen again. Now, I don't want it to happen again.
No.
Let's get that clear. I hope it doesn't. I don't want to relive that. I know nobody does. But I think we would be kidding ourselves if we didn't believe that it could happen again.
It's been a weird couple years for weather because, like I was saying, the two strongest storms I've ever seen have happened while we've been living in our house in Ankeny. And one was a few years ago. You remember that giant rainstorm that came in and dumped like 10 inches of rain in like 3 hours?
I remember that one because that's the other one I've got PTSD from as a meteorologist here.
The red dot that was in Ankeny was right over our neighborhood, so we took the brunt of that night. And
what a rain!
Yeah, everything flooded. It was horrible. And you know why? The other reason I remember when that was the day we took our kid to see his first movie ever.
Wow!
started out so good. We went and saw Incredibles 2 at Springwood in Ankeny. Came home doing our thing. Then it started raining, and then it never stopped.
Yeah, and then you had a lake outside at the end of the night. That was another really wild storm. And I always tell people too with flash flooding, that's one of those that, again, is I hate saying weather's not predictable because that's what I do for a job. But at the same time, you can't really predict something like that. I can talk about heavy rain all day. I don't know that the storm is just going to decide to stop. That's what happened. It did move. And so it's going to flood after a while.
It did not move, but I have firsthand knowledge of that because I was on ground zero of that thing. But between that and then the Derecho, that was the just strongest storm I've ever seen. I'm trying to think blizzards and all that haven't. I don't want to say they seem to be bad the last couple of years, but winters haven't seemed horrible. I mean, other than that super cold day we had, but... Yeah,
and I feel like with snowstorms, to me, those kind of run together in the sense of, we deal with those all the time in the winter, so it doesn't faze people as much. Yeah, you get 10 inches of snow here. It's really windy. It's hard to drive, but we figure that's going to happen a few times a year anyway.
Yeah.
And so they're not as memorable.
So... Brandon Lawrence from We Are Iowa Local 5 joining me on the line. As we kind of wrap up today, what do you guys got going on for Derecho coverage tonight?
Well, so we've got a lot coming up for this evening on our shows. We're not doing necessarily a scheduled special, but in all of our newscasts, we've got coverage of the Derecho looking back from, farms to different towns in the area to how people have dealt with it. And we will be live outside the Buccaneers Arena in Des Moines at 5 and 6 o'clock this evening to talk about the damage that they had on the Derecho day. The roof basically caved in. And then also at 8 o'clock tonight, we have a live Q&A on weareiowa.com and on our We Are Iowa YouTube page. That'll be with our chief meteorologist, Brad Edwards. And it's a Q&A where you can ask any of these questions. What happened? Why didn't we know this was going to happen? Will it happen again? Anything that you have on your mind about the Derecho that you want answered, he will do the best of his ability to get those answered there.
I'm pretty sure they got all their answers from this interview. I'm just saying.
I hope so. I hope there are still questions about the Derecho that I have and will probably have for a long time. And I tell people every single time I talk about it, as a meteorologist, that is a day that I will study for a long time and try to figure out exactly what happened and how we can be better prepared next time.
Okay, you got a second, Brandon?
Sure.
All right, here's my weird question about this. Has there ever been any like conspiracies or mysteries about the derecho that you've heard?
Ooh.
Because, okay, the reason I ask this is because, there's all
Yeah.
the stuff about weather control, like, conspiracies about that,
Right.
chemtrails. And then my wife's hometown is up in Lawler, Iowa, and they believe there's people up there that believe that all the wind turbines has changed the weather. Have you
I've
heard?
heard that. I have heard that one before. I don't know that I've necessarily heard it in relation to the derecho, but I've heard people ask before or say before that the wind turbines have an effect on the weather. To tell you the truth, I don't know how to dispute that, just because they don't put out enough energy to control the weather. We'll put it that way. They don't, because our weather is not just what happens here. Weather is a massive scale type of thing. So when storms happen in Iowa, they're typically happening somewhere else too. And what happens in all of our neighboring nearby states matters to us. All the time I'm looking at what's happening in Nebraska and Minnesota and Missouri, because that's going to impact us at some point too. It's all got to go downstream. So I've never heard that one. I will tell you, if you got a second, a story about when I was working in Louisiana. We had a terrible flash flood similar to what happened here in 2018. And there were some conspiracies that all of the meteorologists got together and caused the flooding or wanted the flooding to happen because we were angry at like city leaders and the people who lived there. And there were people who would send us emails and say, you guys, you made this happen. You wanted this to happen. And to this day, I still rack my brain about that, because even if I were that angry, how would I create a flood?
Well, you've got the weather machine in the basement.
Yep. So I go down there and punch my buttons every day. All right, tomorrow flood. Next week we'll do a snowstorm.
That'd be awesome if it was like that.
Right? We would have some better weather if that were the case.
I know, not as much humidity, maybe a little less heat. That'd be awesome. And fall all year long. That would be mine. But all right, Brandon, we'll let you get going. Thanks so much for the time today, man. Thanks for. I'm sorry we had to relive this together, but I'm kind of glad we did.
That's all right. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. And I got to plug it. If you're going to be at the Iowa State Fair, 11 days, Local 5 Weather Lab. We will be out there. Come see us behind the giant slide across from Snakes Alive.
Awesome. Brandon, you have a good day, okay?
You too, man.